So let's talk about two key concepts of your spousal sponsorship application, especially when it comes to communicating with IRCC. So we'll do it a little differently in this video. We'll divide it into two parts. In part one, we'll focus on web forms, how to create one, when to create one, what kind of inquiries you can make, and how to manage your expectations from web forms. And in the second part, we'll focus on additional document request, also known as ADR, basically a request from IRCC, and ways in which you can respond to that request, including email, your GCK account, and your, you guessed it, web forms. So as always, there are timestamps throughout the video, so feel free to skip ahead. Let's go. So as always, before we begin, let me take you to this page. This is the official Government of Canada IRCC web form page, and I'm going to link it in the description below. It's a simple Google search and you'll get to this. All the instructions on how to create a web form and all the criteria that you should be looking at are all here. Okay, so I'm going to encourage you to really look through these instructions first and then familiarize yourself with this page and then move on to creating a web form. So let's talk in context of the spousal sponsorship application because that's the one that I'm the most familiar with. Obviously, you can apply the same logic to other applications as well. So assuming that you sent your spousal application about a month ago, obviously this is too soon to expect an acknowledgement of receipt. But let's assume either the sponsor or the applicant has changed their address of residence. So now, if your application is in processing and your address has changed, it's your responsibility to inform IRCC that you have had an address change. So let's see how you can create a web form to do that. So you're going to get to this page, and under type of enquiry, because this is a sponsorship application, you are going to select sponsorship, but again, this logic can apply to any kind of application. And under type of application, there is two categories: spouse, common law partner in Canada or outside of Canada. So in Canada or inland application is basically when the principal applicant and sponsor are living together in Canada. And outland is basically when the sponsor is living in Canada and the principal applicant is living outside of Canada. So outland application or family class application was my case, so I'm going to stick to that example. So I'm just going to select that, and then there is space provided with limited characters where you have to write your message. So this is where you'll write your message or your enquiry in detail, describing what this web form is all about. So I've written a sample for address change, and I'm just going to paste it here. So you're going to see how it looks like, and I'm just going to expand it. I basically wrote to the officer and the subject, address change, sponsor name, application details, and when the application was submitted, just some additional details that I chose to provide. And then in the body I wrote, I'm writing this in regards to an address change request for my spousal sponsorship application. I, the sponsor, submitted the application to sponsor my wife on XYZ date under family class. I've not received any communication yet, so I don't have an application number. Just to give them brief context. Then the application was submitted with the sponsor's address as XYZ address. I'm just taking a hypothetical address. Please update the address to the new address below, and then I've provided the new address. So I've given them a context of what this web form is about, whose address is changing. So in this case, we are assuming that the sponsor's address is changing. So I've provided those details here. And I've also mentioned the applicant's address remains the same as before. And there is no format to this, I just came up with this style. You can choose to come up with your own style. As long as you provide the complete information, you should be okay going with any style, alright? You can do the same thing when the applicant who's living in, let's assume, India or outside of Canada in any other country has changed their address of residence. You can raise a web form similarly, alright? Then we come to applicant information. So this is where we provide the information about the principal applicant. Now in this case, because this is a spousal sponsorship and I'm the sponsor, I'm raising this web form, but I'm not the applicant. My wife is the applicant, so I'm going to provide the information about my wife here under the applicant section exactly as it appeared in the forms that I filled out for her. So 0008, 5406, 1344, 5532, all that jazz. Make sure the details that you provide here match the details of the principal applicant in your application that you submitted. Okay, that's how they are going to link it. This is where I'll type in the email address of my wife or the principal applicant. This is where I'll type the date of birth of my wife exactly as I entered it in her application for sponsorship. Country of birth. So again, all these details should match her application. So I'm just going to select the same country of birth. India. Next up is client ID number or UCI. So now if this is your first ever application to Canada for any kind of visa, you won't have a UCI from before. But let's assume you've applied for any kind of tourist or temporary visa before for Canada and now you're applying for permanent residence. You will have a UCI from before when you must have done your temporary visa application. So you can use that UCI here. So in our case, spousal sponsorship, my wife was the first ever applicant to any kind of application to Canada. So obviously she did not have a UCI, but as a sponsor, I already did my permanent residence back a couple of years ago. So I had a UCI. So when raising a web form for cases like this, for spousal sponsorship, I can actually put my UCI. So let's assume you are a single individual applicant and you don't have a UCI. Okay, let's go with a simple case. What to do then? The instructions clearly tell you that if you do not have a UCI, you can leave the field blank. But if you try this, it gives you an error. It won't let you move forward to the next page. So what you can do in the client ID number field is simply enter 8 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. As soon as you enter 8 zeros, the error goes away. Alright. Next up is application number. So this is pretty straightforward. If you haven't received an acknowledgement of receipt yet, you won't have an application number. So in that case, simply type in zeros again and you should be fine. So I'm just going to type in like 4 zeros and see what it says towards the end of submission. So telephone number I'm going to leave blank, and mobile number I'm just going to go with a hypothetical number. Next up is inquirer information. So now if my wife, the applicant, were to raise this web form, she's simply going to select the applicant and all her information from up here is simply going to be copied here. Not much to do here. Now, in this case, the enquirer is me, the sponsor, raising a web form. So I'm going to keep this applicant information just like this, but under enquirer, I'm going to select sponsor, and I'm simply going to provide my details, the sponsor's details, exactly as they appear on the application that I submitted for my wife. So they should match again, all right? Then the next section is consultant or ICCRC number. So now, because my wife and I did the application ourselves, I was the sponsor, I was also the representative, but an unpaid representative. We don't really have an ICCRC number. Only registered or licensed professionals will have this number. So if you're working with a representative, then you can provide that number here. So once I'm done with the details, I'm simply going to select this box to agree and consent, and then hit next. Next up is where you can upload any documents specific to your case. So I'm just going to hit yes. So because this is a web form for address change, and the case that we are discussing is the sponsor who's living in Canada has changed their address, the best document you can upload is the lease or the rental agreement of your newest address. Okay, you can simply upload that here as proof that yes, this indeed is my new address. You can also upload your bank statement or utility bills or any official or government document that has your new address here as proof that this indeed is my new address. Okay, same thing the applicant can also do who's residing outside of Canada and has changed their address. And then once you're done with the upload, simply hit submit and then wait for someone to get back to you on that web form request. Now this is when web forms become really important. So let's assume you sent your application a week ago or maybe 2 weeks or a month ago. So obviously at this point you've not received any acknowledgement of receipt or any communication from IRCC, but you're doing your research online and you find out that you've actually missed an important form or a document. So in this case, you can actually upload your form or a document that you missed out the first time through a web form. Now you're going to want to do this as soon as you send the application and preferably before it reaches the officer. Because let's say you sent an incomplete application to the officer and you didn't raise any web form. Once the application reaches the immigration officer, they are going to realize that you've missed an essential document or form, and then they are simply going to reject that application because it won't pass the completeness check. So if you've missed a document, don't wait for an acknowledgement of receipt email to send that document. You're most likely not going to get an AOR. If you missed an important document or a form, you are just going to get a rejection. So in this case, when you missed a document, you have to act quick. Hurry up and send your missed form or document with a web form right away. So in order to do this, you're again going to get back to this page, and we're talking about sponsorship. So I'm going to select sponsorship here. This remains the same outside Canada. Then I've written a little bit of text here just to give you context and an example of how I would go about describing my situation. So this is just basic details I already showed you. But in the body of this text I'm writing this in regards to my spousal sponsorship application. I, sponsor, submitted the application to sponsor my wife on this date, blah, blah, blah. I missed submitting the document checklist 5533 with the original application. So in this example, we are assuming that you've missed the document checklist the first time. So now you're raising this web form and uploading your document checklist with that web form. I'm hereby uploading the checklist with this web form. Please link it to the application. So again, you can come up with your own style of writing this message. This is the way I would write it. Then again, this is the applicant information exactly as it matches the application forms that I sent for my wife. Then enquirer information, I filled all this with the sponsor's information because I am raising this web form for my wife. So if I scroll down, agree to the consent and hit next, Oh, we got 2 errors. Oh, that's because we forgot to put something in the client ID and application number, because these fields can't be blank. So I'm just going to put 8 zeros here, assuming that my wife hasn't received any UCI. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the error goes away. And application number, I am just going to put 4 zeros like before. Okay, because I haven't received an acknowledgement of receipt, so I don't have an application number. And then let me try this again. All right, it works. So you missed your document checklist in the first submission that you did. So now you will fill out the latest document checklist 5533 and you are going to upload it here. Make sure that if you have missed a form, you are filling out the latest version of that form. Okay. So there are 2 possibilities, broadly speaking. Number 1, someone from IRCC, an immigration officer, gets to your application way before they can get to your web form, and then they realize that the application is incomplete and they reject it right away. They haven't even got to the web form yet. So this case really sucks and we don't want that, but this can happen. All right, so there are chances of rejection still. The second possibility, and this is the better case that we want, is that the immigration officer gets to your application, determines that it is incomplete, but then also gets to your web form along the same time and is able to link the 2 together. So now the document that you did not provide before is now provided through that web form, and the officer is able to locate that, and now your application passes the completeness check. This is the scenario that would be ideal. All right, but like most things with IRCC, there is no guarantee and you can still get a rejection. So the earlier you send a web form with a document or a form that you missed, the higher the chances that you can escape a rejection. Based on the current trends for spousal sponsorship, it is taking an average of 3 to 4 months to receive an acknowledgement of receipt, assuming that you send a strong and complete application. So once your application reaches an officer and it passes the completeness check, they will issue you an AOR. And this process, after sending the application to receiving the AOR, can take about 3 to 4 months. So what I'm saying is wait for at least 3 or 4 months even before you raise a web form to inquire about the status of your application. If you don't hear anything back for 4 months, then go ahead and fire up that web form, and you can ask in that web form that I applied for my spousal sponsorship on this particular date. You can provide all the details like I just showed you before in the previous cases, and mention to them that you've been waiting for 4 months, 5 months or 6 months and just raising this web form to inquire about the status of your application. And when you go to the document section, you can simply upload a receipt or confirmation receipt of the previous application that you submitted. And hopefully in a few weeks or maybe a month, someone from IRCC gets back to you with a status of your application, or at least lets you know where your application is stuck. So once you've sent the application for permanent residence, during any stage of the processing of your application, IRCC can request additional documents from you. So let's say you did not upload all the required documents during your initial submission, then IRCC can oftentimes send you an email with the requests to upload additional documents which they feel are necessary for them to continue processing your application. So broadly speaking, there are 3 ways that IRCC can contact you to provide additional documents for your application. Number 1 is they send you a request via email and they simply ask you to respond to that email. This one is rare, but it does happen. So it's pretty straightforward. Just simply reply to that email with the document that they have requested, and that's it. You are done. Now, the second case, which is more common, is them sending you an additional document request with an option to upload your requested document in your MyCIC or GCK account. So that ADR request can look something like this that you see on the screen here. This is just an example that I pulled up from Google. So as you can see, this is an additional document request for someone who applied for permanent residence, but they did not provide their right of permanent residence fee. So maybe they uploaded their partial fee or did not upload any fee completely. And that's why during the processing of their application, IRCC has requested them to provide the right of permanent residence fee. And they have specifically asked that person to upload that document to the MyCIC account. So MyCIC is your GCK account. So similarly, they can even ask you to upload other documents that you may not have uploaded for the first time or which they feel are required for them to continue processing your application. So this can include any documents such as your translated birth or marriage certificates, Or let's say you've applied for spousal sponsorship and they are not really satisfied with your relationship, so they can ask for additional documents such as wedding photos or proof of financial support or proof of past cohabitation through this document. So then you will have to upload that document to your MyCIC account. So let me show you how you can do that. So this is the page you'll get to, and I'm going to link it in the description below. And as you can see, you can sign in here with your GC key. And if you don't have this account yet, then you should probably register and make an account in this portal so that you can connect this to your application. So don't confuse this GC key with this permanent resident portal which you might have used to submit your application. They are probably not going to open this portal for you to submit additional documents. At this point, right now, they are doing this through the additional document request, and that comes to your GC key. Maybe down the line, they can create a functionality to open up the option of uploading documents in this permanent resident portal, and that will make things easier. But at this point, when you get an ADR to upload documents to your MyCIC account, that is what they are referring to. Alright, so as you can see, I've signed into my GC key account, and don't worry about these two. These are the initial applications that I did for my own permanent residence, and that's why they show up here. But this first application that you see here about permanent residency with my wife's name here, this is basically the sponsorship application that I sent for my wife. So I sent the application using the permanent resident online portal, and once I received the acknowledgement of receipt, once my application was in their system, I was able to link that application to this GC key, and that's why this application shows up here. So if you have not linked your application to this GC key, then it's not going to show up here, and that's why it's important to link your application to this GC key so that you can respond to any additional document requests that IRCC asks you to upload in this MyCIC account. So I show how I linked my wife's sponsorship application after receiving the acknowledgement of receipt to this GC key in this video that should be showing up on the cards here, and it's linked in the description below. Look around the 15-minute mark. That's where I exactly show you how I linked my application for permanent resident sponsorship to this GC key. So now, assuming that you've linked your application to this GC key, it's going to show up here. So I'm simply going to click on check full application status. So I'm going to click on view submitted application or upload documents. So this is the page that opens up. Now this is empty because I did not get any additional document requests because my application processing was fairly smooth. But if you get a request to upload additional documents or an ADR request, and they ask you to upload the document in your MyCIC account, when you open this and assuming you have successfully linked it to the GC key, you will see an option or placeholder to upload document here. So an upload box is going to appear here, and that's where you can upload any additional documents that IRCC has requested from you. So you're simply going to upload that document here and click on submit, and then hope that IRCC connects that to your existing application and then continues the processing of your application. And finally, you can also respond to an additional document request through a web form. So assuming that you have tried everything but you cannot link your existing sponsorship application to your GC key, then you won't have the MyCIC account portal open up for you, and you won't see an option to upload anything there. But IRCC has requested additional documents from you. So then you can use Webforms to upload additional documents. So you must already be aware that IRCC receives hundreds of thousands of these Webforms on a daily basis, so it's pretty hard for them to respond to each and every inquiry in time. So once you submit a web form, then it can take a week or a couple of weeks, even sometimes months for them to respond. So your best course of action once you've sent a web form is to be patient and wait until someone actually gets back to you. When you send multiple web forms one after the other, that really doesn't help your case, even though it feels like you are fighting for your application, but it's not really going to make much difference. Be patient once you've sent a web form and hope that someone eventually gets back to you. That is the best thing you can do. So we talked a lot about communication in this video. Speaking of which, when you send your spousal sponsorship application, you need to prove that you've maintained contact with your partner, especially during the times that you were away from them. And this applies mostly to family class or outland applications. So for a complete breakdown of how to provide chat histories from WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, whether you're exporting these chat histories or you are using screenshots, how to think about translation, how to prepare these documents, and how to upload them in the online portal, I show everything in that video that should be showing up on the cards here, and it's linked in the description below. I'll catch you there. Bye-bye.